Thank you. So, welcome to the final planning committee of this municipal year. As I always say at this point in the proceedings, this is a quasi-judicial meeting and no decisions have been made ahead of the meeting. Members sit on this committee as representation of the whole council and not as ward representatives. And just to remind members that we do not enjoy parliamentary privilege, either full or modified, and therefore you need to bear that in mind in any comments you may make. We do have speakers today on 3 items. I will come back to this when we reach that part of the agenda, but just to remind speakers, we have several situations where the 3 minutes either in favour or against an application is shared. The 3 minutes is in total for each side of the argument and therefore not individual. I know you've been taken through that already, but that will be how we proceed. Turning now to the agenda, the first item is the notice of recording and webcast. This meeting is being webcast and will be available for subsequent viewing on the council's meeting YouTube site. I'm not going to read out the link because it's a string of letters and numbers. If you search for Birmingham City Council meeting YouTube, you'll find yourself in the right place, and that members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item, and any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Can I just do my final bit? That's the standard declaration of interest paragraph for all Birmingham City Council meetings. In addition, you may see members indicate that they'll be withdrawing from an item because they've previously expressed a view on a particular application or site, and members are expected to approach these deliberations with an open but not empty mind. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you. Just for the public record, in respect of item 12, it is in my ward, so it's a site I am familiar with. I've also been contacted by many residents about it as well, but I've not expressed any opinion. I also know the objector, one of the objectors to the application as well, and there is also an enforcement case I've recently reported to planning enforcement, but again, I've not expressed any opinion on the application at all, so we'll still be taking part.
Okay, and Councillor Cornish.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have not expressed any interest at all or made any comment. I think I would point out that my grandsons attend high class but at St Paul's.
Thank you for that. So you'll be taking part in the debate on that item. Okay. In that case, we are on to apologies. And the only apology we have today is from Councillor Beecham, and the rest of the committee are all present. Item 4 is Chair's announcements. I've already referred to this being the last meeting of the municipal year. The next meeting will be on the 26th of May, which is why we've got quite a full agenda today, because we've got an extra week's break until we can meet after the council AGM, and we are hoping to be back in the council house for that meeting. Item 5 is the minutes. You've seen the minutes which have been circulated of the meeting on the 7th of April. Are you happy to approve those?
Agreed.
Thank you. So that brings us to today's planning applications. As I say, we have speakers on items 6, 11 and 12. How we take the items is that we first have updates, then I hand over to Simon to introduce and time the speakers. Then our officers will respond to the points raised by the speakers, and then we open it up to members for questions and comments. We do this in geographical area, starting today with the South. Before we get on to any specific items, can I just say that we've had quite a lot of late submissions which have been sent direct to committee members, which is fine. One well-worded response to the report would be sufficient, but for future reference, it's helpful if those go to the case officer as well as members, so that it can be incorporated in the reporting process. So, starting today with the South, not very far south of the city centre. Item 6 is the former The Trees Public House on Bristol Road, next to McDonald's. Louise, do we have any updates?
We do, Chair, yes, quite a number of updates for members. So we've received a number of revised and updated supporting documents since issuing the report. And this is really to reference the change from 31 stories to 26 stories. We did have the revised plans in and we consulted on those, but the supporting statements have been received, some of them in the last few days. We've had a look at those statements. Nothing within the statements would change any of the conclusions and the recommendations to members today. But just for the record, the reports that we have had for members' benefit, we've had an updated townscape and visual appraisal, which included an updated heritage statement. We've had an updated design and access statement, updated bed space needs assessment, an urban design note, and QC advice, which was advice that QC had given the applicants. In relation to those two last documents, the design note and the QC advice, I know that those were two items that were circulated to members yesterday, so you have those. So just pulling out a few pertinent points from those updated reports, just to supplement the report that you've got in front of you. In relation to the design and access statement, the applicants have noted that in their view, reducing the scale down to 26 stories has reduced the visual impact on the conservation area and listed buildings. The option of reducing it further, potentially down to 16 stories, which has been suggested by the city, would, in their view, result in a less elegant built form, particularly views to and from the city. In terms of the urban design audit that they undertook, they conclude the scheme is compliant with national and local design policies. Just for members' benefit, we don't disagree with those conclusions. Purely from a design perspective, we don't have objections to the proposal. In terms of the bed space report, so this is in relation to the need for new student accommodation. They have updated their report because the application was submitted quite a while ago, and that's really to take into account any consents that have been granted more recently and any schemes that have actually been implemented on site. So that was just to update those figures. That indicates a potential undersupply of bed spaces for students of between 980 and 1,585 bed spaces. So that's an update to the figures within your report. That report also looks at the wider economic impact of the proposal and puts some projected figures in, which are slightly different to the report that you have in front of you. At paragraph 6.4, two particular changes. There's a potential for £4 million net expenditure per annum from students who would be living in the accommodation, and 40 jobs supported locally through that expenditure. So just two updated change in figures there. So those are references to the updated reports. You'll note that our suggested reason for one of the reasons for refusal relates to drainage. We have now had some updated information from the applicant and a revised consultation response from the lead local flood authority. They are now satisfied with the information that has been submitted. So I would like to suggest the removal of reason 4. So it would just be the 3 heritage reasons rather than the drainage reason. So if you were minded to approve, we'd obviously need a suite of conditions in relation to drainage. And then finally, as the chair has mentioned, we have had a number of notes and emails sent to members. I've mentioned the urban design note and the QC advice. There's also a direct letter to members from Fusion students and also a note from them. There's nothing in there that we need to further comment on. I think it's fairly self-explanatory what was in that note. And those are all the updates, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hand over to Simon then to introduce and time our speakers.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've got 3 speakers for the application, 2 objectors and 1 supporter. The first speaker is Tricia Imbigiji. You've got a minute. I'll let you know when 30 seconds you've got left. So could Tricia please make her way to the table to speak?
Shall I begin?
Just give me 1 minute, Tricia, while I do it on the phone. You now start. Thank you.
As a Birmingham resident that lives 50 metres from the site, I have many concerns that my neighbours share. Very simply, the infrastructure does not support that surge in population. There are very limited amenities, and from a city planning perspective, ideally amenities should be part of the planned developments. The existing traffic from residents and access to the McDonald's often back up, which is not reserved for peak commuter times. Residents will have Ubers, taxis, food delivery, Amazon shopping delivery, and more. Public transport is also stretched in the area. Due to inner city congestion, it is not unusual for buses exiting the city during peak times to be full and unable to pick up passengers. Implications to the building process, in terms of materials being delivered, are also will have a huge impact, as Bristol Road is a major artery to the city centre.
10 seconds left.
As it is a predominantly residential area, the disruption, sound and otherwise, will have a huge impact, particularly as many of us are still home working. And I am concerned about Three Stone Road, many of whom, as many of you will know, are refugees coming who will have trauma from war, and with that site will have implications.
Thank you, Tricia. We now have, please, Councillor Matt Bennett to speak. You have 2 minutes, Councillor. So if you're ready, we'll start now.
Thank you. Yes, myself and Councillor Deirdre Alden have objected, and to save time, I'll say I concur with everything Tricia's said as well. Our other objections really concern the heritage aspects, which are down as the reasons for refusal in the report as well. There is a Edgbaston Conservation Area, some great listed buildings. The impact that this, I have to say, monstrosity of a building is going to have on that conservation area, and some of the buildings listed there are quite significant. And you'll see pictured in the report, page 23, particularly the proposed view of the development from Spring Road. You see the significant impact a 26-storey building has on that. It will be entirely out of keeping with the Edgbaston Conservation Area and completely disproportionate for the needs of the area. We also object to the lack of parking. There's always an assumption made that students don't own cars. I can tell you from representing Edgbaston Ward, the road, if you come to the roads around the university campus, you'll find plenty of parked cars there during the university day. Students do own cars, they will own cars, and they will be parking them in the streets surrounding this development. There has not been sufficient provision made. I would also like to draw the committee's attention again in the report to the response of the University of Birmingham on page 12, where they say the location is not desirable for their students. And they point out, as I think we have pointed out in our objection, that the campus living Belgrade View opposite has not consistently held vacancies. And in fact, I believe they're looking to change the use. So I rather suspect if this building were created, you'd be left with this rather unpleasant looking building and coming back to you asking for a change of use at some point in the future, because that I don't believe, no matter what anybody says, the actual real world statistics bear out that there isn't sufficient demand, and they will end up wanting to change the use of this building to something else, which we would probably object to as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. In terms of support, can we please ask Lawrence Holmes to, again, Lawrence, 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds left.
Thank you very much.
You carry on.
Thank you. The proposal in front of you today is really the result of 4 years of careful planning and consideration by the applicant team and your officers to deliver a high quality, well-designed development that will regenerate a long vacant site in this key gateway into Birmingham city centre. The principle of student accommodation on this site is supported by your officers because it is needed. Meeting this need primarily through high quality purpose-built accommodation in sustainable locations such as this one is imperative. Why? Because without it, the pressure to carve up family homes in traditional residential areas of this city, destroying their physical and social fabric, as has been witnessed in Selly Oak, will continue apace. The applicant has acted in good faith throughout the planning process to deliver a scheme that your officers could support. They listened and supported and submitted a proposal that would include a slender tower of 31-storey height, a height that was specifically requested by officers at the pre-application stage, and for good reason. Because of this prominent gateway on a key intersection of Birmingham's transport network lends itself to a tall building of striking design. This is recognised by the Principal City Design Officer in his unwavering support for the proposal. The planning officer's concern is over the level of perceived harm to the setting of some listed buildings and part of the Edgbaston Conservation Area nearest to the site. The Conservation Officer agrees with the applicant that the harm would be less than substantial in national policy terms, and therefore the test is whether the public benefits arising from the proposal outweigh the level of harm. Well, a viable form of development to regenerate a highly visible, derelict and unattractive site, the creation of a striking landmark building of high quality design, an attractive frontage providing strong passive surveillance, generating footfall and expenditure to support city centre businesses, creating new jobs and training opportunities, meeting students' needs and ensuring their well-being by a high quality provider with a proven track record, and taking the pressure away from Selly Oak. Notwithstanding these benefits, the applicant has sought to provide further comfort that the level of harm in heritage terms will be at the lowest end of the scale and can be outweighed by the benefits. They have done this by reducing the height of the tower to 26 stories. This remains tall enough to deliver the design quality required, but reduces its appearance in views from the northernmost part of Wellington Road and Spring Road. Whilst the proposal will not be seen from most parts of the conservation area, where it is visible, it will be of an appropriate distance and height to ensure that it is not overbearing,
30 seconds
diminish
left,
the
Lawrence.
ability to appreciate those listed buildings. Despite the recommendation put before you, with the amendment now made to the scheme and the significant benefits that it will deliver, we hope that you can support this application. Thank you.
Thank you to all our speakers. Louise, back to you for any response to the issues raised that haven't already been covered.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you to the speakers. So just picking up on some of those issues that they have raised. Just in terms of the highway transport impacts and car parking, we've worked closely with the applicants and their transport consultants along with our own highways colleagues, and you'll note from the report that there are no objections raised from highways. If we were minded to approve in terms of any short-term impacts during the construction, we would obviously recommend a construction management plan, but we're comfortable in terms of the level of servicing that would be required for the proposal. And as I say, that there are no objections in terms of traffic generation from our highways colleagues. Just in terms of the comment that was made about the University of Birmingham objecting to the location or saying that it wasn't an ideal location, something that they would necessarily support. I think if you read the report, you'll see as officers that we've accepted that it isn't an optimal location. It does lie between a number of the educational establishments rather than being in close proximity to one of them. Or one particular university, and we have noted the comments from the University of Birmingham. But Fusion, who would be operating the scheme, are quite clear that the development would be open to students at any of the universities, so that could also include BCU or Aston University. The site's on a very good public transport route on Bristol Road. It's also on a dedicated cycle route to get to the University of Birmingham. It's within reasonable walking distance of Five Ways Station and also back into the city centre. So although we've said that it's not ideally located, we don't feel that on its own that would be a reason for refusal that we could defend. Obviously, the issue of location does start to come into the overall balance when you're looking at the proposal and looking at the public benefits. But I think that we've been clear within the report in terms of the view on location. Just in relation to comments from the applicant, in terms of the need for the student accommodation, we've accepted that argument. We're not disputing that. And members will be aware that that issue was aired extensively at the recent public inquiry that we had in Selly Oak at the Triangle site, and the advice that we had from council at the time, and also the decision from the inspector there was that there was still an unmet need for student accommodation within the city. So as you will see in our conclusions, we are not suggesting that that would be a reason for refusal. We concur with the applicants on that particular point. So where we fetch up in terms of accepting the need, accepting the location, accepting the design, is, as the applicant said, the impact on the heritage assets, so the nearby Edgbaston Conservation Area and the listed buildings, particularly those in Spring Road and Wellington Road. We don't depart significantly in terms of our view on the less than substantial harm. Our conservation officer has done a detailed analysis of the heritage assessment and then done her own assessment. And both of those conclude there would be less than substantial harm. Where we do differ from the applicant is then in that balancing exercise, is that harm outweighed by the public benefits that the scheme would bring? Obviously, the starting point for the local authority is the statutory duty to preserve the setting of listed buildings and also to preserve and enhance the conservation area. And that's your starting point in making a decision on any application that impacts on heritage assets. We do acknowledge that there will be some benefits that come from the development and the regeneration of this site, but we don't think that they are significant benefits or wider public benefits that would outweigh the harm. And that is obviously the balancing exercise that you often as members have to make, where you're looking at developments in close proximity to heritage assets. Do those benefits that flow from the scheme outweigh that harm? And having looked very carefully at the scheme over the many years that we have been looking at the scheme with the applicants, we don't believe that the proposal in front of you would deliver enough benefits to outweigh the harm, and hence the recommendation to refuse the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, I'll open it up to members for comments and questions. Councillor Johnson-White.
Thank you. I've read quite a lot of paperwork on this application. There was a statement, and I can't quite remember which point I've read it, that student accommodation to prevent further HMO. I'm not quite sure that I agree with that statement. I rather think that it's the other way around. Purpose-built student accommodation is in fact where predominantly students are drawn to in their first year of academic life. I am in agreement with the refusal of the application by virtue of the harm that it would cause to the Edgbaston Conservation Area for all the reasons that have been discussed this morning. I won't go through all the various things that have already been said. The comment made regarding about the pressure away from Selly Oak, I think if we
go back through the needs of accommodation. It has been touched on about the triangle and the needs assessment, etc. My own personal opinion is that there isn't a need for more student accommodation, but that's another discussion for another day. But there is going to be a need for accommodation in other areas of Birmingham. But this particular application is not about that. It is about the conservation area and the harm that it would do to that. And I am in agreement with you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I also agree with the recommendation for refusal. I don't think we should further erode the character of the Edgbaston conservation area in the name of providing more bed spaces. There seems to be this argument that we need to move them out of Selly Oak, but I think it's been overlooked that actually Edgbaston Ward also has substantial student accommodation itself, particularly most of it associated with the University of Birmingham, but not exclusively. So I don't think this is a ward that has no student accommodation, which would justify this. So very much support the refusal.
Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing I want to say is that actually there's elements of the design that I quite like. I appreciate the use of red brick. I think the slender tower element of the development is fairly aesthetically pleasing. And if this was a general use residential development in the city centre or in Digbeth, I can see us as a planning committee approving it without any hesitation on the design front. That said, I would agree with Councillor Bennett's comments around the scale and the height of the development, even when reduced to 26 stories, the effects that would have on the local residential area. And I also do still remain unconvinced that there is sufficient demand for a development of this kind in this area. Anecdotally, knowing people that lived across the road as students, it wasn't an ideal location for a student from BCU or from the University of Birmingham. So on that basis, I'm not convinced it's required. And finally, I think I really sympathise with the objectors' comments from Trish regarding taxis and deliveries. It may be a small thing, but go to Selly Oak on a Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday or Saturday night between the hours of 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock, and you'll barely be able to drive through because of the number of Ubers, Bolts, and private hire vehicles. It may seem minor that it's only a couple of hours a day, but given how busy the Bristol Road is, there is nowhere sufficient for a taxi to pull in and drop off at that on that road, which will inevitably lead to the surrounding residential roads being entirely clogged up by, with respect to the students, drunken students climbing in and out of taxis, and equally the noise disturbance that will cause when students return at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 a.m. So on those grounds, I think I'm minded to refuse as well.
Paul, can I bring you in on this one about the transportation aspects?
Certainly the review in terms of car parking provision and the cycle parking and the sustainability elements are all documented at 7.21. I would advise, notwithstanding the comments made by members today, that there would be insufficient reason to translate that into a highway safety issue. It's more of a noise and disturbance issue. There are other measures that can remove any errant parking if that were to be a facility that's generated by this proposal as submitted. And in terms of your local policies and current car parking policies, I would suggest that a highway reason for refusal, certainly a parking reason, would be a make weight reason for refusal.
And of course, because refusal is recommended, we don't have a set of conditions before us, so some of those issues might be picked up. Louise, do you want to come back on the comments raised?
Yeah, I think I've covered most of the points already, Chair, but just in terms of this issue of need, because obviously we keep coming back to it, just for members' benefit, the updated student needs paper, which you saw was over a year ago, that should be coming to committee either in the May committee or early June. So that should be with you, and that will have all the updated figures and the information from the universities, etc. So obviously we can have a further discussion and debate about that, and obviously how that affects the city, and then the sort of the sub-regions within that.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anybody else indicating, so I'm working on the basis that you're ready to vote. We are voting on the recommendation, which is to refuse. So we are voting for and against that recommendation. Everybody clear? So can I see those in favour of the recommendation to refuse? Thirty. So that is unanimously refused. Thank you. That was it from the south. We're heading now for the city centre and Nick is joining us. And first up in the city centre, 153 to 161 Corporation Street. This has both a planning application and a listed building application. We don't have speakers, so we don't have to divvy it up between the planning and the listed building. So we will discuss the two applications together, but then, of course, as usual, vote on them separately. Nick, updates.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so there is one update in relation to the full application, which is 2019/10362, and that is that the principal ecologist has reviewed the scheme and recommends a construction ecological management plan condition due to the potential impact upon birds and bats. I can read it out. It's a very lengthy condition, but if members wish me to do so, I will read it out in full. That's the only update, Chair.
Thank you. I think members will take the technical advice as read, rather than needing read out. And in our usual fashion, a new condition recommended by officers automatically becomes part of the report unless anyone's objecting. No, so add that to the conditions. And if you've got no further updates, I'll open it to members. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I'm rather torn on this application because in one part I very much welcome the reuse of the listed building and being brought back into use. I think that's incredibly important. That's very much welcome. And I appreciate in order to obviously make that viable, there needs to be something done to the rear of the building. But I'm really unhappy with what they've put forward. So the height I was initially concerned about, but it does seem to match with the existing buildings. But I'm particularly swayed by figure 7, which is the CGI. And this, I always say the CGI shows you the best possible outcome. Buildings never look as nice in real life as they do in CGI most of the time. And it just looks pretty horrendous. It looks like some sort of, I know it's meant to be terracotta, but to me it looks like a grey block that dominates the listed building, which is just really disappointing. Because I think if we had something that was better designed, it would actually enhance the listed building in front and the others in the area. But I just really find it some sort of horrendous block that's just been whacked on the back without any real consideration. And the close-up of the terracotta cladding doesn't particularly convince me of any real benefit to it either. So I'm just really disappointed that actually this could have been a really good application, had some greater consideration been given to the building at the rear, particularly given it is going to be quite visible, certainly in the way it's presented in figure 7.
Anybody else? Councillor Johnson-White.
Yeah, I kind of echo what my colleagues said there in paragraph 4.7, the Victorian Society, although they support the plan to bring the building back into use, they do make mention of the rear of the building to the proposal to collect the extension, and which sort of ties in with what Councillor Moore has said. On buildings like this, all of the buildings important, not just the front bit that you can see, but it should all, in my opinion, have the same level of care and attention. And the proposal here that it's said about, to just clad the back bit and the whole look of it, I'm a bit torn, as my colleague said. But having read the whole of the paperwork in respect of the other comments that have been put in the report from the Historic Society, who have no objection, I'll leave my comments there.
Anybody else? Councillor Stanford.
And to be fairly blunt, I think the extension is very ugly. I think when we're putting up very nice buildings like the 103 Colmore around the corner, and we're redeveloping so much of the city centre, I don't think it's in keeping with those developments or the heritage assets that we already have in the city centre.
Anybody else? Councillor Straker-Wells.
Yes, I was sitting on the fence as well, Chair, which is one of my favourite positions. On the other hand, I'm getting used to some of these city centre developments. You know, you can either provide an interesting contrast with what already exists as a kind of architectural feature, or you can try and look like the existing architectural features. I'm not making this easy for myself, but however, I've come to the conclusion that I could just about stomach this on the grounds that even though it's not a massively pretty site, nevertheless, it does not, from my point of view, and having read what is said about the heritage, it does not seem to me to detract substantially from the heritage assets, which obviously we take very seriously. So I'm going to climb off the fence now and say that even though I've heard and listened to with sympathy what's been said by other people, I think I could find myself sufficiently in favour of this to raise my hand at the right moment.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nick, back to you to respond to those points.
Yeah, well, obviously they all revolve around heritage. In terms of the quality and the amount of consideration that's been given to design, it's substantial. You'll see that the reference number on this application is 2019. It's been in the system a good while, and a lot of that has been agonising over detail with the terracotta and also scale. Now, you'll see that Historic England are saying that the city need to be satisfied that this amount of development at the back is needed to save the building, basically. Although the ground floor is in an okay situation, the upstairs and a lot of the terracotta, it's not just about bringing this grade 2 star listed building back into use. There's a hell of a lot of restoration that needs to happen as well, and you will see in the report that it actually, even with this scale of development at the back, it still needs grant aid of a tune of 1.7 million. So I think we need to consider that in the round. Obviously, the Conservation Officer is happy with where we fetched up, and that the harm is less than substantial to a moderate degree, to use their terminology. So hence the recommendation before you, really. Thank you.
Did you want to add anything, Simon?
Nothing other than, to say, architecture's very subjective, isn't it, on that, and it's whatever principle about applying to it, but it is about weighing up that, outweighing that harm to the listed building, which is full of rich detail. We have to accept that. We are getting a terracotta building, and it's not a flat building either. It is baguettes, so it has got some relief in that facade. So from that perspective, I think it's appropriate in its application.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in before we vote? Okay, I will take the vote then on item 7, which I think is the planning application. I've got it the right way around.
Indeed, yes.
Okay. Can I see those in favour of the application? Okay. Those against? Those abstaining? Thank you. So I make that 10, 2 and 1 abstention, which means that the planning application is carried. We move on to the listed building consent. Can I see those in favour? That's 13. That is unanimous. Thank you. Approved. Turning the page, but staying in the city centre, we head next to the Jewellery Quarter for land at 1 to 4 Key Hill Drive, numbers 2 and 54 to 58 Key Hill, and 17 to 21 Hockley Hill. Do we have updates, Nick?
No updates on this item, thank you, Chair.
Okay, we don't have speakers. So do we have any comments or questions? No? Having studied the report, are you ready to vote on this one? Okay, can I see those in favour of this application? That's 13, so that is unanimously approved. And item 10, the last one in the city centre, right in the city centre, the Smallbrook Queensway buildings. Updates?
Just the one, thank you, Chair. It's just to confirm that the city design team raised no objection.
Okay. Members, questions and comments. Councillor Straker-Wells.
Thank you, Chair. And for a once in a lifetime instant event that's going to be a massive advertisement for Birmingham, I can't help but feeling that such an advertisement is justified. Yes, you will be able to see it from outer space. Yes, if it's not luminous, you'll be able to see it. If it's luminous, you'll be able to see it at night. But it actually echoes the theme of the games: be bold, be Birmingham. And I can't help feeling that this will be, as long as some issues that come into my mind, I can be reassured about some of these issues. Now, may I, Chair, offer these issues? First of all, as it stands in the picture, it looks great. How robust will it be in terms of the kind of materials? It's not likely to crumple or fall to bits or shrink in heavy rain or whatever. Please just forgive my ignorance, but it would be really nice to have reassurance that it will look as beautiful during the period it's up as it does in that picture. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, anybody else want to come in? Councillor Stanford.
Thank you very much, Chair. I agree with Councillor Strathman-Welt in part. The be bold, be Birmingham message behind Commonwealth Games is absolutely on point. And I think that's the message that we should be celebrating: the creativity, the sporting prowess, the history, the culture of Birmingham. And I've got no reason whatsoever to refuse this application, so I will be voting in favour. But I would like to register briefly that I think we could have made a better opportunity of a wrapping of this size in such a prominent place within the city centre, rather than what, to my eye, looks a lot like a supersized clip art image from 2004.
Anyone else? I'm not convinced you'll be able to see it from space, though I know there are pictures from the International Space Station where you can see the Bristol Road, Pershore Road parallel section. Councillor Moore, you wanted to come back.
Thank you, Chair. I very much echo Martin's comments. I mean, the CGI makes it look so good, it should be permanent. It's far better improvement of what the building currently looks like. So, but I suspect the weather of Birmingham will probably take its toll on it. It won't look so good, potentially in front of the games as well. So I do hope it will be maintained, and so it does look as good as the CGI suggests, because wouldn't reflect well on the city if it was covered in mess.
Okay. Not sure quite. I'm sure you can reassure us on maintenance.
Well, I can partly in that. Obviously, I'm not a manufacturer of building wraps, but what I do know is that the company behind this are the same company that have wrapped Selfridges, and that's been up a while now, and that seems to have fared Birmingham's less than pleasant sometimes weather. Pretty okay. In terms of graffiti, I think it's all out of reach, actually. I don't think, unless you,
like a challenge.
for the most, yeah, well, there you go. And the other thing is that we're only recommending a 1 year consent as well here.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Are you ready to vote on this one? Can I see those in favour? That's 13, that's unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Nick's disappearing and Tony's approaching the table in order to steal. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. Joe's approaching the table because the first one on the east area is in fact a householder application, and that's Joe's department. We do have speakers on this one, so I'll ask Joe for any updates and then hand over to Simon.
Thank you, Chair. We do have an update. We received an amended plan that removes a ground floor side facing window it would face the number 66, and it's the bedroom in the rear wing. There's patio doors at the back, so we felt that removing the side facing window would reduce the impact on number 66. So we've had an amended plan that shows that window removed. And that's all the updates.
Thank you, Simon. Over to you to manage the speakers.
Thank you, Chair. We have 2 speakers in objection and 1 speaker in support. First speaker is Ellie Crook. Ellie, you've got 2 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds. So when you're ready.
So on the developer's plans, at every revision stage, the plans continue to breach the 45-degree code. Planning officers deemed it acceptable to disregard the policy on the basis that it's a Victorian house with an existing wing. However, there are numerous examples in Birmingham where the 45-degree code has been applied to Victorian houses with extensions the same floor plans as these, where it's been used for refusal rather than approval. This is an inconsistent application of policy by the council. The planning officer did undertake a site visit to our house and took photos demonstrating just how dark our main living space already is. However, these were not attached to the officer's report. We feel this omission is completely unfair as it does not allow committee members to review all of the evidence that was gathered. At present, all of the surrounding homes have a bathroom at the 2nd story rear, all of which have an obscure glazed window. The proposed plans show a bedroom at the 2nd story rear with a larger clear glazed window. I find this to be completely unacceptable as this looks straight into all of our gardens and it compromises the privacy and the enjoyment of my outside space. And finally, I object to the massing of the side extension. It's completely excessive, and at present there are no houses on our street between Six Ways Island and Oakfield Road with side extensions, and none of which have extensions visible from the road at all. So there are 2 semi-detached houses, and none of these have any alterations that are visible from the road. So I completely object to the side extension as it's out of character with the street scene, and it's just completely excessive in its massing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Councillor Brown, please. You've got 1.5 minutes when you're ready.
I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to comment on this development. I'm not opposing this development for the sake of doing so. However, like Ali and Sam, I share their concerns regarding privacy and the reduction of natural light due to the mass of the development. I am aware that they've attempted to raise concerns about the development over some time, and I can see that the latest plans do not feel that their concerns are being addressed. While the proposed upper floor is less intrusive, my understanding is that the ground floor is just as large and that their initial concerns regarding light, etc. remain. My reading of the plan is that the measurements have not actually changed, and I fully agree with the family that their 45-degree right to light is likely to be breached. I also feel that the development, if completed as proposed, would make the finished house jar with the surrounding properties and seem completely out of place in a residential area where the properties are of equal size, shape and character.
30 seconds left.
I would request that the committee defers the application today so that further consideration be given to allow the development to be permitted within a way which meets residents' concerns and the needs of the new homeowners and ensures that the finished development is one which is sympathetic to the immediate neighbourhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Okay, Masood Akhtar, please. You have 3 minutes and your time starts now.
Right. We have proactively worked with the planning officer to revise the scheme several times, and we have reduced the proposals to comply with all the national government and local council policy guidelines. And officers have checked the 45-degree code, and the proposed development complies with that as well. We have taken board the previous objections raised by the adjoining neighbours, and we have the new scheme respects their amenity space, and at the same time the proposals comply with all the planning policies. So the planning officer has recommended the application be approved, and therefore I request respectfully that this planning application should be supported for planning approval. Thank you.
Thank you to all our speakers. I'll bring Jo in to respond to the points raised.
Thank you, speakers. Firstly, When the scheme first came in, we felt that the impact on the neighbours was harmful. We asked that the 2-storey side extension was reduced in depth because there's a side facing first floor window, bedroom window, that we didn't want the extension being built in front of effectively, so we pulled that back. There was the first floor rear extension as well. We reduced the scale of that, and we reduced the scale on the ground floor extension on the back. So there were a number of reductions made in terms of the scale of the extension. The reference to the 45-degree code, the distance when you take it from the number 66, and when I refer to neighbours, I'm mainly referring to number 66 because number 70 has a series of outbuildings that extend into the garden and a bathroom window in the back, so there isn't any adverse impact on that side. We had to carefully look at the impact to number 66, and that's why we asked for the amendments to be made. The distance from the number 66's lounge window, it's a cornered window, so on the side and the rear elevation, when you take that at a 45-degree code angle, it's 7.5 metres from the new proposed extension to that window. Normally, if there's a breach in the code and it's over 6 metres, we would feel that the impact is reduced because of the distance, because 6 metres is a considerable distance from the extension to the affected window. What else? The window on I've already said in the updates that there was a window on the ground floor side facing on the side elevation that we've removed in order to reduce that impact. The agent agreed to remove that and sent us amended plans. Other issues raised, the first floor rear facing bedroom, that would in effect be on this 2-storey side. It's a bit confusing because there's a 2-storey side extension, there's a rear extension at first floor, and then there's a ground floor rear. So I'm trying to make it clear which element I'm talking about. But on the rear, I mean, having a rear facing first floor bedroom window isn't out of character. You know, that's kind of what we would have, and a lot of arrangements across the 2-storey side extension. The new element, it's the window onto the front and the rear would be obscurely glazed, so there wouldn't be any overlooking issues there. The photos that we didn't, that's not normal procedure that we would put photos in an officer report of neighbouring properties. That's for our assessment. And we use those, that we gather the evidence and we make the decision, but we can't put every piece of evidence in the reports, or they'd be quite long, to say the least. Yeah, I mean, overall, I feel that it's not excessive in size. We'd feel, I mean, the 2-storey side extension is only 1.3 metres wide. Yes, it's visible from the front, it's set back, it's set down. I don't think it's excessive in scale. The first floor rear extension was reduced, and the ground floor element is 3.5 metres from the wing with number 66. So we feel overall that it's acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jo. Anyone? No, I'm sorry. There's no comeback at this point. You've had your shared 3 minutes. Councillor Johnson-White.
Can I just ask, on that row of houses, because at 2.3 says the application sits itself within a small row of semi-detached dwellings of a similar character and age. On that row of houses, are there any other houses that have had any form of extension, or will this be the first one that will have had any? I know you mentioned about different properties and outbuildings. Is this the first one that will have had any form of an extension?
No, it's not the first.
It's not.
Yeah. And with permitted development rights, properties can extend, as you know,
I
without.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
But this is not the first one that would have had an extension.
It's not the first one that would have an extension, and the character is quite varied on the road anyway, because you've got apartments and you've got different types and styles of houses.
That's the Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question. I think in your update just then, you mentioned that the side extension will be 1.3 metres wider than what is existing currently.
Yeah.
Is that from where I'm looking at photograph 3, from where the door comes out with the small roof, or the main building itself?
It's from the main building itself. So yeah, the principal side elevation. Yeah.
And
It would be. Sorry, yeah.
And in terms of access to the rear of both properties, is that still leave space for there to be access behind?
The access is, I think actually in building this, you wouldn't be able to access the garden from the side, because there's only, I think it's 1.8 between the two. So they'd be building on their side access essentially.
Would that implicate the side access for the neighbouring property?
No, because they have their own as well. But I mean, there was, and part of the objection, there was concerns about wildlife, about interfering with their access to their garden and slabs and different issues like that. But, you know, I think with any extensions, there's going to be an element of disturbance to the neighbours, but it's short term.
And of course, party wall issues are to be resolved between neighbours and aren't a planning consideration. They're a civil matter.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Go on, Martin.
Yes, I just hate to betray my ignorance, but such as it is, it's about the 45-degree code, which I wouldn't mind having a bit more explanation about, in terms of the difficulties that the objector has mentioned, and indeed, you know, not just difficulties, but perception of how this is going to impact on the people next door.
Well, the 45-degree policy talks about when it's applied to winged properties, that there's an element of flexibility applied, and it talks about ensuring that there's enough private amenity space retained. And in this case, there's well over, I think it's 120 square meters retained even after the extension would be built. It's basically to enable the issue you have with these is where you have a winged property, there's usually a breach in the code anyway. So if you're building beyond that, the question is, does it have any greater impact because there's already an existing breach? Do you know what I mean?
Existing breach.
So yeah, that's the way the policy's written, to apply it flexibly in that sense. But it's 7.5 meters away from the neighbouring property anyway. So even in a typical case, if it's seen as being over 6 meters, we would normally accept that the impact's reduced, and it's acceptable because of the 6 meters away from the built form, the new built form.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would like a further explanation of that, and perhaps I'm minded to kind of ask for it to return with some more detail on that, because we've heard, and I know it was outside the time, that there isn't an issue at the moment.
Yeah, but even if
create one.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is normally on winged properties, semi-detached or terraced winged properties.
Yes, no, I understood that point.
Yeah, we apply it. There's usually an existing breach, but even if there isn't an existing breach, what I'm saying is if there's 6 meters, it's seen as 6 meters is the point where we would feel, even if there is a breach, there's sufficient distance to reduce the impact. Do you know what I mean? So even if it was a pair of semis or a detached house, if the breach is more than 6 meters away, if it was right next door, you know, if it was within 3 or 4 meters, we would still think that it's significant enough to refuse the application. But because it's so far away in this case from the window, we would feel that the impact's reduced. So it's really about how close it is to the new extension and where the breach is.
We can't defer.
Does that help?
Yeah, we can't defer for more information if there isn't any information missing. Anybody else wish to come in on this one? Anyone wish to make any further comments or suggestions? Okay, in that case, I'm going to put it to the vote. Can I see those in favour of the application? Five. Those against? Four. Five. Okay. And those abstaining? Okay, that puts the decision to me then, because it's a tie. Having studied the report and heard the discussion, I'm not hearing anything that provides a defensible reason for refusal, and therefore my vote goes to approve the application. Thank you. Thanks, Jo.
Thank you.
Now we will get Tony to do the rest of the eastern area. Starting with item 12, land to the east of Sutton Road in Erdington, where again we do have speakers. But first of all, Tony, have we got any updates on item 12?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We do have updates. So I know that there are speakers against and in support of the proposals, but they have both submitted additional correspondence. The comments received largely repeat what is covered within the committee report, and therefore I will keep my comments short. The agents have provided a letter outlining the amendments which have been made to the proposals through the course of the application, and also the benefits of the development. Also, they have provided a brochure to members outlining the proposals. In summary, it is stated that the materials have changed from grey cladding to brick to better reflect the character of the area. A boundary wall is proposed along Sutton Road, as well as the provision of electric vehicle charging spaces and additional tree planting and landscaping around the site. In terms of transport, there has been a number of highway-related concerns raised by Highclere School, who are located opposite the site to the west. These concerns have been raised by an objection letter and a report prepared by Arup, which have been fully addressed via technical notes. The benefits of the development include a vacant brownfield site will be redeveloped to provide a new food store. The proposal will improve customer choice and enhance the shopping experience in Erdington. The proposal is fully compliant with both the sequential and retail impact tests. The proposed building will provide a clean and contemporary design. There will be a positive economic impact as a result of new employment. Highclere School has written a further objection primarily on child safety grounds created by the access point proposed. The school have sought their own legal and highway advice. They consider that the proposed access only 75 metres from the traffic lights and opposite the site egress increase the risk of accidents. Also, they consider that the immediate road network is already over capacity during busy periods and will only get more congested as further development is added. This will lead to their egress being blocked, and they consider that an access to the north of the site should be used. Also, it is considered that reference should be made to the Arup report that the school commissioned and request that the proposals are refused or deferred giving the applicant the opportunity of providing a safer access. In addition to those comments, 3 further letters of objection have been received, raising similar concerns to those other objections set out in the committee report, and also 1 letter of support has been received. One minor correction to the committee report, paragraph 7.22 should refer to policy DM6, noise and disturbance, rather than policy DM8, places of worship. And also for clarity, condition 10, prior submission of a construction employment plan, also includes the local employment strategy within the detailed wording. And condition 21 should include words provision of delivery and service area prior to occupation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So for the last time today, I'm handing over to Simon to introduce and time our speakers.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we have 2 speakers, 1 for and 1 against. So could I ask Louise Flowith, please? You have 3 minutes, Louise. I'll let you know when I press the button, and I will then give you a 30-second running down time. So when you're ready.
Chair and members of the Planning Committee, I am Chairman of the Governors at Highclere School, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. I know the headmaster has already written to you. Highclere is a not-for-profit charity. Lidl are a profit-driven retailer. We don't object to a supermarket here. Indeed, we welcome it. But you will understand that our absolute duty has to be the safety of the children in our care. And Lidl have left us no choice but to object. And the school has serious concerns. There are over 2,000 school children close to this magnet, not just Highclere pupils. Previous Lidl application used the safest access solution, but this one uses the least safe because the number of conflicting vehicle movements is increased. The Arup report confirms the proposed supermarket access is unsafe, and squeezing in a future drive-through or residential scheme means overdeveloping the site and therefore having to use this least safe access. Drive-through sites are profitable, and a profit-driven retailer is looking to squeeze in more development in order to make more money. But what is being sacrificed is safety, which cannot be acceptable. The headmaster has explained that the school has been ignored, and Lidl did not consult us to understand how our traffic system works. Yet now want to interfere with the school's sensitive traffic management plan for exiting the campus, which will potentially impact our business through queuing traffic blocking our only exit. Lidl refer to our exit as part-time, but it is in fact constant use. Finally, the headmaster has also explained our solicitors are concerned that various issues have not been addressed in the officer's report. There is no explanation why concerns raised by Arup have been discounted. There is no consideration of using the alternative safer access or why it has been
30
discounted.
seconds left.
And there is acceptance of the applicant's conclusions without any consideration or analysis. We therefore ask that the application is refused or is deferred to allow time for our concerns to be properly considered. I respectfully urge you not to approve the current application, which will compromise safety for all, and in particular the safety of over 2,000 children who we must protect and who surely deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Jim Budd, please. Jim, the same applies to you. You've got 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds left. So when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. My name is Jim Budd, and I'm a director with the firm SCP of a high-risk consultants to Little GB. I've advised Lidl for over 20 years and have worked on this application alone since 2019. And I'm speaking to you today because of the concern expressed by a few on the location of the access. What has been submitted is the best location for it in terms of the master planning of the whole site. But I would like to reassure members that we have not compromised on safety in any way. I have liaised with your highways officers over many months and they are fully supportive of the proposals. We have had stage 1 and stage 2 safety audits undertaken under your officers' supervision, and the audit team have been present during the morning school drop-off period and the afternoon. Their advice is completely impartial and no issues were reported. Yes, there will be occasions during weekday term time only when cars will emerge from Lidl at the same time as cars emerge from Highclere School, but there is no material risk at all to highway safety as a result of this arrangement. Turning traffic has excellent visibility of each other, of pedestrians and of through traffic, and there is more than sufficient stopping sight distance of the pedestrian crossing given the low speed at which traffic will emerge onto Sutton Road. Where Lidl stores are located close to existing schools, parents will often combine the school drop-off or pick-up journey with a trip to Lidl, and I am convinced that this will happen here. Lidl accept this and they welcome it. They welcome the additional activity and custom. And I've had direct dealings with many Lidl stores that are either opposite or adjacent to schools, and I've seen how once built, the Lidl complements the school very well. There are also many additional and strong material considerations to support the proposal, including improved consumer choice for Erdington, high quality deep discount convenience food, provision of up to 40 full-time equivalent jobs paying more than the national living wage for over 23s, the regeneration of a prominent long-standing vacant site on a key route and efficient use of brownfield land, and a shared pedestrian cycleway through the entire site, providing a safe route between Sutton Road and Orphanage Road. Just turning to the planning application as a whole, you would have seen how the scheme complies with all local and national policies, and there were no objections from any statutory consultee, including highways, design and heritage officers. Lidl have responded to consultation comments received, including design and heritage with red brick elevations and boundary walls with railings, landscaping, additional areas of landscaping and mature trees. And these amendments ensure the scheme will provide substantial improvements to the locality and be sympathetic with Grade 2 and Grade 2 star heritage assets directly opposite the site. If planning permission is granted, construction will start in June and the store will be open early 2023. I therefore trust that you will accept your offer's recommendation for approval. And
3 minutes, thank you, Jim.
Thank you to our speakers. Tony, do you want to respond to the points raised, or shall I go straight to Paul for a transportation view?
Just a couple of points, thank you, Chair. Thank you for those comments. So the school have no objections in principle, the Lidl store. Their main concerns revolve around highway safety, particularly the point that the access into and out of the Lidl store will be opposite the school egress, the current school egress. They make reference to a previous planning application that was submitted in 2018, where the access into the Lidl site was to the north of the access currently proposed. That application wasn't determined. That application was withdrawn by the applicant. So there was no consent from the 2018 application related to an access to the north. The plans that we have before us are purely for the new Lidl store. So the other two sites which are indicated, i.e. the agent made reference to a drive-through and a residential site to the rear, that plan is purely for indicative purposes only. We are here today purely to consider the application for the new Lidl store. Finally, in terms of consultees, we've consulted a whole raft of consultees: ecology, conservation, English heritage, transportation, and so on. And we've had no objections from any consultees on any matters. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Paul, you've spent some time on this. Would you like to talk us through it?
Yeah, the history in the report in front of you indicates the activity over the last few years in terms of the previous application that was withdrawn, as Tony mentioned, and the current situation with the current offer and access proposal on behalf of Lidl. We're aware of the relationship of the school entrance and the operation of that. Not only was that indicated by the CCTV footage provided by the applicant's agent, but also more recently and more up-to-date information on behalf of the school from their transport consultant, Aaron. And it's an interesting review to see the dynamics of the interaction of pedestrian movement and vehicular movement as a result of the controlled exit that the school have and the manner in which that's used throughout the day, and the peaks of the peaks within that in relation to the proximity of the existing controlled pedestrian crossing and the rest of traffic flows along the section of Sutton Road. The site has the benefit at the moment of three established vehicular access points. The one closest to the signalised junction with Station Road would be removed permanently, and the northern one at the moment within the proposed layout plan would also be removed. That leaves centralised access, which already exists, being modified into a form of a bell mouth with pedestrian refuge, which would accommodate the car parking arrangement predominantly for the little arrangement, but also, as Tony mentioned, a future potential development site on the right-hand side of the site frontage when viewed from the road. The submitted traffic analysis may have alluded to the fact that this could be a certain type of development, but the application does not describe that proposal as part of this proposal. Clearly, members will see within their planning report the application description does not include any development on that land or even the land that fronts onto Orphanage Road, and that land at the back is also subject of level differences. So at the moment, the submission sits fairly and squarely with the impact of the proposed discount food store of the size proposed, with the evidence base of the trip rates and the trip rate profile that we have become used to seeing on this level of retail activity, this floor area. So the trip rates that have been indicated and the profile of movements and turning movements, I would advise members are sufficient and satisfactory for the consideration of the impact on the local highway network. The most recent CCTV footage does indicate at different points of interaction along the highway network the implications of traffic, existing traffic and peaks within peaks on the existing network, and it shows how driver behaviour accommodates that activity. The little store will introduce additional movements on the existing access points redundant at the moment because the buildings have been demolished. But that little proposal has modelled as accurately as they can with agreed software the implication of turning movements from the proposed development, both exiting the store and entering the store, and further debate with SCP on behalf of Lidl, with Arabs have indicated amendments to the proposed access arrangement insofar as carriageway markings, which would help to ensure that blocking back that currently exists on the network is minimised as far as possible. Members may see some of these carriageway markings around the city. Deep clears and yellow boxes, for example, are very often used to ensure that any lengthy queue back of traffic along a particular network does not stifle or segregate traffic from adjacent access points. And the final point, of course, whilst this appears to be creating a crossroad junction, the dynamics and layout of the adjacent site, the existing school site and Lidl, and the operation of the existing school exit would mean that there would be minimal cross traffic between the two sites. So on balance, I am content with the current submission, and I'm content with the current level of design. That will, if members were mindful to agree to the submission, form part of a highways agreement, which would have further detailed design analysis and also additional safety audit checks to ensure that as the detailed design progresses, there would be sufficient review of potential conflict with regards to the project.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I know the site incredibly well, not only because I'm councillor in the area where I used to live around the corner from it, and I was a governor of the Abbey, which is just up the road, so I know this stretch of road incredibly well. Spent a lot of time walking up and down it, so I'm very familiar with the vehicle movements as well. So I think first of all, broadly, principle of the Lidl, happy to support. It is a long derelict site. It's been massive need of regeneration for many years. Much needed. I know Lidl, certainly from the conversations I've been having with residents over the many years, are broadly supportive of the concept of a Lidl. And this site did have planning permission for a Sainsbury's store in the past. So over and all, very much welcome it from that perspective. But my main concern is around the access to the site, particularly as the schematic in the report makes it very difficult to actually establish if there is indeed a right turn lane into the site. I believe there is, but I'm rather concerned about the potential impact, not only for Highclere directly opposite and the challenges that they will have getting in and out, as has already been touched on. But I think everyone is familiar with the problems of Princess Alice Drive and the sheer consequences of having a turning point where traffic, huge volumes of traffic trying to turn into somewhere and blocking up the road. Now, I appreciate this is clearly not on the scale of that, but my concern is that if traffic backs up, because a lot of them want to turn right into the store, particularly if we're going from south to north, which is where the main issue will occur, is it's going to back up and block the main arterial route. This is the main route between Sutton and the city centre through Erdington. There's a lot of buses that travel along this route. It's very, very busy. There is a junction quite close by across Quays, which if that gets snarled up, causes huge amounts of traffic chaos in the area, particularly when we've had roadworks, for example. And I suspect this site will be used for parents to collect their kids from, which I don't have an issue with. That takes it off the residential roads. That's a potential bonus. But if you've got a lot of parents all rocking up at once wanting to turn right into this, it's going to snarl up. So there needs to be sufficient space to accommodate all that, because it's not just Highclere across the road. It's not just the Abbey. You've got Osborne as well round the corner too. You've got lots of other uses taking place within the area. So we need to make sure that we fully factor all that in before any approval is given. So really, really concerned that this is going to have a huge impact on the highway network and cause a load of problems, when it should be a real positive addition to Erdington, which is very much what I want it to be. And I appreciate we're not considering it at the moment because we're just looking at the Lidl store, but there are other plots on the site, which we don't know what those are going to be, but they are likely to have traffic uses as well. And particularly as one of the things that has been mooted is some sort of drive-through. Drive-throughs are notorious for snarling up and backing out onto main roads. The McDonald's up the road at the end forever backs up onto the Chester Road. There are other sites as well, I know from elsewhere, where this is a problem. So again, we need to factor in that should that eventuality happen, that it's properly taken into account. We don't have a situation where Erdington basically becomes a car park because no cars can get through it. So I would like reassurance from Paul that those issues have been fully considered and addressed as part of the process.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I agree with everything that has just been put forward by my colleague, and to thank Paul for the information he's just provided on looking at the highway situation. But you've also made me think a little bit more along those lines, on the fact that you're happy the way it appears to be now, but also prepared to look at different ways in the future, which again is a little bit sort of undecided on it, just actually what effect it will have. No problem with the Lidl store at all. We would welcome that. But my concern is the access route, which is extremely close, in my opinion, to the congested traffic light junction within Sutton Road. This can be chaos many, many times throughout the very busy time. Sutton Road is already over capacity and usually blocked during the busy periods. And we do know, and I would also agree, the safety of the children must be our first priority. We know that children will jaywalk, and doing that, they're also looking at the phones in the meantime. totally oblivious to whether they're in the middle of the traffic or not. But they will always do that, which is a big problem for everyone. So the way I see it, there must be a safer alternative access solution. And I would ask our officers to look into a safer route prior to recommending this for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Anyone else? Councillor Griffiths?
Considering the safety of children, there's an outside Highclere school, there are railings along the side of the road, which is presumably to stop children from rushing out across the road. I don't see any plans for such railings on Lidl side of the road. And quite clearly, children who go to Lidl to buy something may well want to rush back to school. So I think we should think about a condition of some railings being appropriate to guide the pedestrian crossing back to the existing pedestrian crossing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Paul at this point and ask you to, Gareth?
Sorry, just I would support Councillor Griffith's suggestion of the railings, but can I ask that they're in keeping with any railings on the Highclere side, because there are some heritage style already. So given the heritage buildings, particularly the old abbey itself and the church, it would be nice to have that perspective of any boundary treatment or new railings out of it.
Okay, it's getting a bit competitive here. Tony, you wanted to come back on that point?
So thank you for those comments. So clearly the principle is welcomed. In terms of, just briefly, in terms of wall railings, the applicant are proposing a low wall and railings around the site to Sutton Road, which those railings will be in keeping with the railings on the opposite side of the road. In terms of access and other comments, I'll hand over to Paul. Thank you.
Paul, can you answer the points raised and then talk us through how the highways agreement would be reached and whether the concept of curbside railings could be considered either as a condition now or as part of the highways agreement?
Starting with that point first, that would become part of a formal Highways Act agreement. We commonly call that Section 278 agreement, but it is part of a detail of the accrual of additional material with carriageways, surfacing and equipment that needs to be maintained, but also always linking back into a detailed review. At the moment, it is very much a fitting in principle detailed design in order to establish, from the developer's point of view, the capacity, ability for the predicted traffic movements on the development proposal as described. So very much saying it is the food store trips that are part of this equation. The dilemma here, of course, is that there's been a mention with regards to a drive-through. That isn't part of the formal submission, so I can't give much weight to the way that would impact. If that were to come through as a formal proposal, and I know people's concerns about that would be the second phase, that would have to be going through its own process to ensure that the impact, very real impact of that, viewing traffic, the percentage of whether that traffic is 100% passing by or whether it's new to the network, but certainly the internal movements associated with that would have to be reviewed if that became the next phase of this. But I completely understand people's nervousness. That is beyond the realms of our prediction here, because we can only look at flows from the proposed development as described. But certainly in terms of the highways infrastructure, the guard railings, that would be part of a detailed review. And at each stage, the road safety audit becomes more detailed in its review. Even after, if there is an approval and an implementation on any development, the road safety audit process goes into a post-implementation review to pick up any issues that haven't been assessed or any new issues that have come to light since the operation of any highway change. So not just this development, but any development. In terms of the queuing, the applicants have, after further discussion with the school's transport consultants, increased the level of activity, the turnover of spaces, and therefore the weighting of traffic flows within their prediction associated with the store, they admit that in fairness, they would never normally see that activity, but just to test the model that they run as accurate as possible with additional weight. That predicts a particular level of queuing within the proposed refuge, patched refuge on Sutton Road. And they're confident that that prediction could be accommodated within the length of the refuge available. Now, there are situations today, and the CCTV footage will show, that there is blocking back. There is a blocking of not only northbound but the southbound because of the way the network operates and the way it's controlled and the constrained nature of the development area, Station Road. But they're confident that their procedures would enable the development of the little traffic to be accommodated satisfactorily without causing demonstrable harm in that respect in terms of highway capacity. The next stage would be to see where any future development proposals would or could add to that impact. But that would only be a decision and a review that we can make when more details of that are revealed. In terms of the interaction with the school, it's a very real issue. Walking down the roads and errant movement. What I've seen from the CCTV footage for the moment doesn't seem to indicate that, although I did notice a minibus associated with the school. I say that because the occupant of the minibus parked on the footway on the side of the development site, ran across the road through the gates to the school and was in the school grounds for several minutes and then came back. So I can only assume that what appeared to be an unmarked minibus appeared to have some calling request to the school. And of course, any review of Sutton Road, in addition to the physical measures, there would also be a review of the traffic regulation order measures to ensure that holding, loading, unloading facility that could occur at the moment in the locality. So I think there are lots of things to consider in terms of the operation of the established school exit point, managed exit point, that controlled exit point, and we're aware of how that operates. But I do think that those are aspects that, as the design through to the highway process evolves, that the road safety audits associated with that would pick up on those matters and ensure that there is no detriment to the network operation.
Councillor Straker-Wells.
Thank you, Chair. I have actually been to Erdington. In fact,
I'm sure I've seen you there.
quite a few times recently, but I haven't been to this bit. To be candid, I mean, I would like to be in a position to support this application. As well as traffic congestion, there's another problem for me with schools, which is idling traffic, which really doesn't do very much for the health of young people. So having heard what Paul said, I can imagine that if the traffic can be kept moving, that is less of a hazard. If you have traffic building up because of the parents, teachers, the ordinary traffic of people going to the school, if you have that building up, then of course that is potentially a hazard. So I would seek reassurance about the problem of idling. In other words, will it be worse than it is now? Will it be roughly the same? How will it shake down?
Okay. Paul, are you able to take that one?
I need to refer to the fact that I believe there's an air quality assessment document in this policy, but I would have to defer to Tony to get to the detail of that, because that's something that's looked at by other officers.
That's right. The air quality, there was an air quality assessment submitted, and the result of the air quality assessment was that any change would be negligible, particularly over a period of time. And regulatory services have been through the air quality assessment, and then they agree with those conclusions that any effect would be negligible.
Paragraph 7.24. Okay, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate Paul's reassurance. My slight concern is that if what is feared will happen in terms of the entrance, once the entrance is built, it's built. What redress would there be if it turns out that the problems with the queuing traffic and the impact on Highclare's exit were to come to pass, how can those then be addressed? Because that's my main concern. Is that, particularly with, going back to the Princess Alice Drive thing, that is a well-known problem, and I want to avoid it from happening to start with, rather than having to spend considerable time as a councillor having to potentially address it at a later date, because it wasn't properly thought through at the time of the planning stage.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, as mentioned, the road safety audit would be a post-implementation review of the operation to look at the implications of the as-built scheme and how that settles down. But that can only take you so far in terms of the future predictions, because there's traffic that's not associated with this particular development that can be predicted at the moment that could involve queuing at any point in any part of the network in this part of Erdington. So it's very difficult to draw a specific with regards to the impact, the future impact, to whether it's because of this development. All developers can do is predict the input, the throughput of the traffic that is, the proportion of traffic that's turning left and right, and therefore to demonstrate the percentage of vehicles that may be required to queue at any particular time. That's not an exact art, but it is something that they're aware of that needs to be profiled within the variations, typical variations of trip attractions that you will get to this location and any other location. So whilst it's not an exact size, there is a post-implementation review, but that would be mainly to do with road safety as opposed to highway capacity.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, in that case, are you ready to move to the vote? I see those in favour of the application. Hold 12. Those against? 1, and that's everybody accounted for. So that's 12 in favour, 1 against. That is approved. Thank you. And we move on to our last application of the day and of the municipal year, which is 889 Chester Road, the return of 889 Chester Road, because you deferred this last time for further information, which has now been provided in the report. Tony, do you want to add anything to what's in the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There is an update on this one. So since the circulation of the report back, further information has been received from the agent relating to the use of the property. They have advised that there is no record of it being used as a family dwelling. There has been no council tax band allocated to the property since 8th of January 2012, and also no rateable value history on the property. Therefore, the current use is a care home. The client purchased the property as a vacant property, and if it was being used as temporary accommodation, then that was unlawful, and they consider that the use is still a care home. The property was used as a care home, and the Care Quality Commission website still indicates that the property is a care home. The estate agent marketed the sale of the property for potentially different uses subject to planning consent, with the exception of use as a care home within Class 2 licence for 12 bedrooms. The property was built in the 1930s, and it is acknowledged that the sanitary facilities would require upgrading to meet current legislation to make it suitable for modern standards. It should be remembered that the use of the property as a care home ceased a number of years ago, and that the facilities remain outdated compared to a modern care home facility. Additionally, the property has fallen into disrepair internally since its closure as a care home. Therefore, the agent considers that based on the records available within the valuation agency, the Care Quality Commission and community tax records, the property still falls under a use as a care home. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come back in? Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Rather bizarre that the applicant has said that, because I have seen the advert that Councillor Alden has referred to. It was quite clearly being advertised as being an occupied family home. I'm not an expert on care homes, but I generally assume they don't come with pianos. Some large houses do. So I'm not quite sure how they can claim that was a leftover relic from the care home. So it does strike me as rather bizarre. There's also the fact that the electoral roll has people living at the address. Which is something I did check prior to, well, last week. So it just seemed even more strange considering they've said, no, it's definitely been empty, that there's someone clearly been on the electoral roll there. So it would suggest, and it's trying difficult to take my mind back, but certainly I remember when this property was sold, because it was sold as 3 separate properties. The neighbouring 2 were converted into residential and are currently occupied as residential still. So it seems strange that of the 3, 2 would become residential and remain so, and 1 would fall empty and not be, especially when it has a very nice piano in it from the photos. So I'm not entirely convinced that it is the case that they're saying that this was an empty care home. I'm very much of the view that it is a residential home, and therefore there are additional policies which need to be taken into account, particularly the loss of a large family home, because it is 9 beds. There aren't a lot of 9-bed properties in Birmingham. There are lots of large families about who I'm sure would want a 9-bed property, and there's nothing in the report that demonstrates that property is surplus to requirements. I know they seem to think that it needs some work doing to it. The photos I saw, which been sold very recently, suggested it was in reasonably good condition on the inside. So I'm not quite sure how much work is required to make it into a family home, but given it was up for sale as one, it seemed perfectly
Before I hand over to you, Tony, can I just say that care homes absolutely love pianos, even if they are gifted ones that maybe aren't entirely the most practical type. And I have looked at the sale ads for this. Tony's already told us that there's no legal trail for people who haven't lived there. Is there something else you want to add in response, Tony?
No, so members will recall that the application was deferred to check whether there were any other HMOs within a 100-metre radius. So we have done that, and we've gone back to information that from the last couple of weeks. And indeed, there are no other HMOs or exempt accommodation within a 100-metre radius. So policy basically says that if there's more than 10%, we would normally seek to refuse the application. In this case, there are no other HMOs within a 100-metre radius. So the only other key matter to consider is whether we are looking at the loss of a family dwelling house. Now, planning history says that the property was last used as a 9-bed care home 12 years ago. It's been vacant since then. No community tax has been paid for any of the use. The applicant purchased the property as a vacant property. I mean, it may be the case that during that 12 years it was used intermittently as HMO accommodation or as a family home, but clearly from a planning point of view, that use hasn't been established. It would need to have been used continuously for at least 4 years, and we would need evidence to demonstrate that that was the case. And we have no evidence to demonstrate that. So from a planning point of view, we consider that the lawful use is a care home, and therefore we don't need to consider the loss of a family dwelling house in this case. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Stanford.
Thanks, Chair. Can I ask for a point of advice on our planning guidance? Obviously, we talk about a loss of a family home to be considered. Is there anything in there at all to do with loss of social care beds or facilities, or does that fall under commercial and is therefore not relevant?
Simon? I mean, I've seen care homes closed because they are both for adults and for children, because they are not of a modern standard, and gone to other uses or temporary uses. I'm not sure we've got a policy.
No, we don't. No, we don't have a policy to protect care homes. No.
That's something that we can look at implementing.
Yeah, there's also, of course, sorry, I'm going off topic, but I'll just answer the question. There's the trend towards smaller units for a lot of people that require care, a more domestic scale rather than large scale care homes. So that may also be a factor. But if we haven't got policy, then it's something we'd have to look at. Anybody else got any points they want to raise on this one? No, in that case, are you ready to vote? Can I see those in favour of the application? 9. Those against? 2. And those abstaining? 2. I make that 922, and that is accordingly approved. We move on to other urgent business. Anybody got anything that won't wait till the new year? Councillor Moore.
Chair, should we thank all those councillors who are stepping down?
Yeah, that's the little note I've written for myself, but I was just checking whether there was anything else. So for those people who are standing down, all our thanks for your service and your contribution. Councillor Moore, will you pass that on to Councillor Beecham, please, because I don't know whether his email's still operating, so if I can get you to pass it on personally, that would be great. Councillor Booth, Councillor Griffiths and Councillor Johnson-White are also standing down. Councillor Ward, I'm not sure what you're doing, but Councillor Ward is changing wards as far as I can see. But if you're not back with us or back with the committee, then thank you for your service and contribution. And of course, we'll be missing Councillor Cornish because she's going into her year as Lord Mayor. So that's brilliant. Have a great year. Can I thank all the officers who keep us on track and focused most of the time. We're without Pete from the Northwest today and James from enforcement, so our thanks can be passed back to them. But also Julie and the team who actually keep us functional in the committee meetings, and the Democratic Services team who support us through our changes of location and so on. And a quick thanks to our press coverage who've stayed to the bitter end today. It's great to have you. Thanks to everybody, and whoever comes back next time, all the best for the new year. Thank you. That's it for today.